Hi guys, I'm with Grappling Hearts. Today we've got Mason Fowler on here with us. Mason, to start us off, do you kind of want to talk about what got you into jiu-jitsu?
Yeah. So I really didn't even know what jiu-jitsu was. I started training for MMA. I was a fan of the UFC, and eventually I fell in love with jiu-jitsu. And I always knew, even when I was training for MMA, I always knew that like I wanted to get my black belt, and I always knew that I had a passion for jiu-jitsu as its own kind of thing. And then eventually, when I stopped doing MMA, that's when I started pursuing jiu-jitsu full time.
Cool. So how long did you do MMA roughly for?
Um, Maybe like 5 years, 4 to 5 years.
So you had quite a bit of experience in the cage.
Yeah, I
Um,
had 8 fights total.
8 fights. What kind of promotions did you fight for?
I fought once for Bellator. That was my last fight.
Awesome.
I had a second Bellator fight scheduled. That would have been my third pro fight. And it's a funny story. I did like the whole fight camp, and I like was on weight and everything. And like the day before the weigh-ins, my
Yeah.
opponent got shot in a drive-by. I mean, I shouldn't say funny story, but
Oh my
he
God.
didn't die. It's funny because he was like a really big. Are we allowed to cut? Can I cuss?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, he was like a big shit talker, and
Yeah.
he was calling me out for months and talking a bunch of crap, and uh, and then he ends up getting shot in the butt, and he was still gonna fight, but he posted like a picture of like his butt with the bullet hole in it, and the
Yeah.
commission actually like pulled him from the fight
Because he posted a picture or because of the injury?
because he posted the picture of the
Wow.
injury. But if he hadn't have posted it, like he said he was still like good to fight. I don't know. If I would have gotten shot, I wouldn't have fight. But he's like
Absolutely not.
not the smartest guy.
So if he recovers, do you still want that fight, or are you just kind of chilling off from MMA right now?
I mean, I I would take like a fight that made sense, but the problem is that now, because of my like, I have a little bit of uh name in jiu-jitsu, not like I haven't won black
You're
belt
gaining
worlds or anything
speed.
like that. Yeah, I have a little bit of a name now, and so I'm actually making like a decent amount of money to compete now when I'm doing these like matches. And
Yeah,
so it just doesn't make sense. Like I'd have to train for like honestly, if I was to do an MMA fight, I would want to train for like 6 months just to get my stand up back to where it was. Cause I used to have really good stand up, but I
yeah.
stopped training it. And I don't want to go in there and not look sharp. So I would need time to get my stand up sharp again. So it would have to be worth it. Like just realistically, I don't think I would be offered the amount of money for it to like be worth it. Like, how much money could I make just doing jujitsu in 6 months
True. And
compared to you can compete every weekend too.
true. You hear a lot of these high level jiu-jitsu people who've done both MMA and grappling, and they will always say that there's more money in jiu-jitsu. And like you said, you can compete every weekend, you can train as hard as you want without the risk of or as big a risk of injury. You hear so many people say it's just smarter just to stick with jiu-jitsu unless that's just what you love. But
Yeah, unless I mean the exceptions are guys like if you look at Damian Maya or like Jacare, they've probably made more money with MMA, but it's because they like had their they like made their name first in jiu-jitsu, and then they transitioned to MMA, and then they're doing MMA consistently, and they made it to the UFC, and they're ranked top 5, top 10 in the world. I know that I'm not gonna be able to get to that point. And the reason why I stopped doing MMA is because I was already having problems with like concussions, and I, I I started getting kind of worried about getting hit in the head. And obviously, if you're a fighter, you can't worry about getting hit in the head. And
right.
uh, and so the amount of like fights and the amount of like punches to the face that I'd have to endure to get to the UFC and then to make big money in the UFC, I don't think would be worth it. And like I'm already 27, so I'm happy with where I'm at right now. And my goal right now is to I'm like right under like there's like the top level guys. I feel like I'm like the next tier down, and I'm trying to break into that like world class level. So that's more my priority right now.
Well, and you're definitely doing the right steps to get there, I feel like, especially, let's talk about the last Mission Underground. You're the only brown belt going into that. Let's talk about maybe some of the expectations you had versus some of the realities you were met with.
Yeah. Honestly, I thought it was going to be a little bit more to my advantage because of the rule set,
Yeah.
the overtime rule set. Really, the only guy in the bracket that I've lost to before is Roberto.
Uh-huh.
But both times that I lost to him was in the gi, and I have a lot more accomplishments no gi. I'm a little bit better no gi, and I think he's a little bit better in the gi. So I thought just the fact that it was nogi was going to be more in my advantage. And then when you add on the overtime rules, I thought would be more in my advantage too because I'm probably about 30 pounds heavier than him.
Got you.
So
Um,
then when you're starting on the back, I feel like that would have been my like a big advantage for me to be bigger and stronger to be able to control him from the back.
I could see that. So do you train a whole lot of overtime?
Yeah, I mean even before this, we've had some guys that have came in to train. Like I know you probably know Jake Shields.
Yeah.
He's done like a lot of the submission undergrounds, and he actually lives not too far from CTA, and he regularly comes and trains with me and Yuri and some of the other black belts at CTA. Um,
Some.
so like anytime he was preparing for one of his super fights in submission underground, he was coming to CTA, and he was just asking us like after the training if we would want to do like the overtime positions, and I was of course happy to do it because I was thinking that I would probably be competing in the overtimes eventually. So I hated it because uh, he was more trained and experienced in the overtimes than me. So when
Yeah.
I would go with him, I would lose like most of the time because he had just prepared more. He had spent more time there in those specific positions. But looking back now, I'm like, okay, I'm glad that I kept doing it with him because it like helped me get better. And then now that I've been focusing on those positions, I feel like I was already like a little bit farther than maybe I would have been if I wasn't doing that with him initially.
That's definitely good that he helped you do that and you stuck with it and didn't just like, nah, man, I ain't doing that. What's some of your favorite rule sets to compete under?
I really like the IBJJF rule set. Um, I I was just even kind of talking to someone the other day about like wishing that I could have a match after this, maybe have like a match with Craig under the IBJJF rule set just to see. Um, the biggest thing that I like about it is that you can't just like sit to your butt. You have to establish a grip before you
Yeah.
sit, right? So when you implement that rule, it opens up an opportunity for the guy to score an early takedown. And that's one of the things that I'm really good at is when the guy tries to pull, I'm good at getting that first shot in. And then as I'm shooting in, as soon as I touch your legs, you can no longer pull or it's going to give me 2 points. So then as I'm shooting in, as soon as I grab your legs, then I can pull. And then the guy, under IBJJF, the guy can't just like sit back for a leg lock or for a submission. They have to like try to engage and pass your guard. Um, so it depends. Like certain guys, like against Craig, I think my favorite rule set would be the IBJJF rule set because he's a leg locker and also that little detail of him having to touch before he sits. Those two things I think would work in my favor. Um, for someone else, like for maybe like a really good IBJJF points player, my favorite rule set would be submission underground, because then there's no points and then you can start on the back. So And then I really like the ADCC rule set too because um, the rule set forces a lot more wrestling, which I'm really comfortable with my wrestling game. So honestly, I wouldn't say that I have a favorite rule set. I would say that the different rule sets would, with my game, give me advantages and disadvantages against each individual person that I have a match against.
That's the first time I've ever heard it worded like that. That's really interesting. And you bringing up wrestling, did you ever wrestle a whole lot, like in college or anything?
No, I didn't wrestle in high school or college. That's like a big misconception. Everyone always says I have a wrestling background, um, which I'll take it like it's a compliment. It means that my wrestling looks good, I guess. But um, I just have been blessed to have high level wrestlers around me. And then also, I've always taken advantage of any opportunities to learn wrestling or to train wrestling. Back when I was in Fresno, the MMA gym that I was at, they started a fight team there, and they recruited a couple really high level wrestlers to the gym. Some of the best wrestlers on the world. We had Ed Ruth there, who was on the world team, which is
Nice.
insane. Yeah, he's a 3-time Division One national champ, 4-time All American. And then we had another guy too, named Deron Wynn, who's like on the U.S. national team. He's fighting in the UFC right now, and those two guys are just like amazing wrestlers. And they became like two of my best friends. And also, I was their jiu-jitsu coach for MMA, so I was teaching them jiu-jitsu, and then they would help me a lot with my wrestling too. So I had them for a solid maybe 2 years that I was training with every day. And then also, when I came down here to San Jose, uh, at first, when I was about 3 months out from ADCC, I was going to AK on the wrestling days and
Got
wrestling with like DC was running the practice. My friend Duran actually moved to San Jose too, and he was there. He's the one that brought me into the room, and like Khabib was there with all the Dagestani guys, and then they have like a bunch of Division One NCAA wrestlers that are training for MMA there at AK too. So there was a lot of guys I was wrestling with there, and then I was teaching Nogi at Kyle's gym, and someone was telling me that like one of the white belts in the class was like a really good wrestler when he was younger, um, and I didn't really know too much about him. And
yeah,
then I found the guy. His name's Sean Hennebree. I started talking to him one day, and he was telling me that he's like a former D1 wrestler out of Fullerton, and he actually has owned like his own wrestling gyms before. He's like a real wrestling coach, like a full-time wrestling coach. And I was thinking like, damn, no one ever told me that. They just said like, yeah, this guy used to wrestle kind of thing. So I
yeah,
just asked him like, hey man, I'm training for ADCC. I'm really passionate about wrestling. I have a little bit of wrestling kind of background. I used to train with these guys, and he's like, oh yeah, I know those guys. And I was just like, man, I'll if you ever want to, train, kind of help me out for ADCC. And man, he actually just kind of went full blast with me, and he started coming into all our practices, and I was working with him maybe like 2 or 3 times a week. And that was the first time that I had like a real wrestling coach. Before it was like wrestling athletes that were helping me, but this
yeah,
time I had like a full-time wrestling coach that was giving me drills, and we were just drilling like for a solid at least 2 months, like 2 or 3 times a week. And that, like at ADCC, is when my wrestling was like the sharpest it's ever been. So yeah, no wrestling background, but just like have gotten blessed to. It's weird how things work. Like there's like a random white belt in my Nogi class that's like like probably one of the best wrestling coaches in the area, and then also is like the nicest guy and is just like willing to help me. You know what I mean? For nothing, just to be a good dude.
yeah. And that's one thing I really love about this community is that usually people are nice enough that if you show that you're serious about it and show that you're one to put in the work, usually they'll work with you. So it's really awesome. 'Cause, like, you don't see that a whole lot in other sports, or I feel like you don't. Other sports, you're usually like chucking out the money to get help.
Yeah, exactly. And so the cool thing with Sean too is that he's a blue belt now, and like he was gonna do Nogi Worlds, and so I kind of returned the favor. We were doing some like sessions to get him ready for Nogi Worlds, and then I was training for Nogi Worlds too. So in that sense, I can kind of like return the favor a little bit by helping him with the Nogi training. He ended up getting injured like right before,
Oh,
man, I mean, with his wrestling background and with our all the guys we have here at the academy and with Professor Kyle, I think he could be a killer too. He's a little older now. He's I think maybe like Master Two,
oh,
uh,
okay.
but man, I think at Master Two, I think he'll double gold for sure. At Blue Belt Master Two, he's a beast.
Well, maybe he'll get his shot as soon as this whole pandemic is over. It's
Yeah, for
ridiculous.
sure. Hopefully they do Nogi Worlds in December. That's what I'm hoping for.
Awesome. So I had read that you did like rugby at one point in
Oh
time.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So did do you feel like maybe some of that athleticism kind of transferred over into all this kind of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. And I actually like my little brother played rugby for 1 year
Yeah.
first, and then the next year his rugby practice was starting, and at this time was like probably like I was personally probably being like the least productive that I've ever been in my entire life. I was like I I wasn't going to like traditional high school. I was doing like the home studies.
Oh, okay.
Um and I was just like smoking weed every day and like drinking every weekend, like Friday and Saturday. And I was smoking cigarettes. I used to smoke like Newports, like a pack a day. When I was
Oh,
like 15, 16, 17, I was like a piece of shit, you know? I was like a terrible kid. Uh, and that really, rugby is the thing that like got me out of that because I've always been super competitive, like ridiculously competitive. And but I wasn't playing any sports, and I think that's what kind of led me down that wrong path. Is because if any time that I've had sports or something to be competitive with, my mind will be like so like stuck on that. But I had gotten away from sports, and anyways, I went out to a rugby practice with my brother, and this is when I'm like, smoking, drinking all the time, and I was like I was like chunky. I was like the same weight that I am now, but I was a lot younger and I didn't have like nearly as much muscle. So I was definitely like kind of chunky, but I wasn't like really fat. Uh, but I go out to this practice and man, I like literally almost died. I was so out of shape, and the coach had us do like a lot of conditioning, like sprints and stuff. And
oh
I
God.
was so embarrassed by how out of shape I was. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't feel my legs. Um, and there's like big, like 300-pound dudes that are outrunning me. I was blown away. And man, I didn't want to go back, but also it was like a struggle. The next like couple practices was like a real struggle for me to go. I like almost didn't go. And man, I'm glad I did. It was like one of those things where I almost didn't go, and then I'm like, oh, I'll go. I'm glad I did because it got me into great shape. I got down to like 170 within like a month or two,
Nice.
um, and I ended up falling in love with rugby, and I played a little bit longer. But I actually my whole goal was to play for one season to get in shape and then start doing MMA. That was like in my mind. But I fell in love with rugby. You know, you find like a group of friends. You have like the camaraderie with these guys, and they end up all being your best friends. And then I ended up playing for another year, and then after that, I started working full time, and I stopped playing rugby. And that's when I was like, okay, now's the time to go do MMA. I'm not doing anything else right now.
Got you. Do you still work full time and try to compete and all?
No, now back when I was in Fresno, I actually made the decision to quit my job.
Okay.
I actually gave my car to a family member just because I didn't want to have like the payments. I had like a pretty nice car, gave it to them, just told them to take over the payments. I don't want any money. I just don't want the payment. Um, and started riding my bike to the gym every day. And then I was just training full time. And then I eventually like started teaching like one class at the gym. It's like $25 a week. And then I built that up. And then over like the next year or two, I got to the point where I was teaching like 12 classes a week. And then since then, I've just been solely like competing and teaching. And like every once in a while, I'll do like a seminar here or there. I'm not really big enough to be doing like seminars every weekend, but I do a couple. And then just do like private lessons and teaching classes. And then now it's cool because I like won some money at the last tournament. So hopefully I can keep going with like super fights and money tournaments and hopefully be able to teach like a little bit less and be able to focus more on training.
That's awesome, man. I really love hearing stories like that. It's really humbling to hear one's beginnings, or to me it is. So you've got Craig Jones coming up. Let's talk about how you prep for someone like Craig.
Um, Honestly, it goes back to the rule set. You know,
Um,
I would prep for Craig 5 different ways if there's 5 different rule sets. In
got
this
you.
rule set, reaping and heel hooks are legal, and that's one of his specialties. So that's definitely one of the things that we have to focus on. Um, it's a 5 minute match
Yeah,
as opposed to ADCC where it's like 10, 15, 20 minutes. So we're focusing more on just like going crazy for 5 minutes.
got you.
And we know just by like his style and by watching him in Submission Underground, during the 5 minutes, he hunts for submissions the entire 5 minutes.
100%.
So we can't sit there and stall and try to rest and save our energy for the overtime. We have to fight him as hard as we can for 5 minutes. Ideally, we find a sub somewhere within the 5 minutes, right?
Right.
Maybe get to his back, maybe get to one of his arms, and then obviously training a lot of the overtimes. Pretty
Probably a
much the
smart
game
game
plan is to
plan.
fight him with everything for 5 minutes, and then hopefully, I mean, in the overtimes, a lot of it comes down to just who can hold longer and who's more tired.
Right.
I know I have really good conditioning, and so if we're both fighting for 5 minutes, it's going to come down to who like has that little bit extra in the tank at the end. And he's really good in the overtimes too. It's definitely not going to be like, okay, let's get to the overtimes and then we're going to win. The goal would be definitely to sub him in the 5 minutes because he's really, really good in the overtimes too. But we can't just count on catching him in something. He's also really hard to submit.
Yeah.
So, we got to prepare for everything.
100%. Like I said, I really enjoy hearing different people's game plans and how they strategize. Mason, I feel like you've had quite a few different defining moments in your career. So, what do you feel like has been some defining moments for you?
Yeah, definitely. The first one was Nogi Worlds at Purple Belt because that was the first major IBJJF tournament that I won. It was my first time ever competing at the Nogi Worlds, and I double golded, which I think
Nice.
like says a lot because I like came out of nowhere. And it also like showed me that I belong and I'm not just like an MMA guy anymore. I can like beat the best guys in jiu-jitsu in their rule set too. Yeah, definitely the double gold at the Nogi Worlds. And then that whole year I kind of like went on a tear where like I won Euros and then I won Worlds and I got second in the absolute at Worlds, all at purple belt. So that all stemmed from the Nogi Worlds, that first win, you know.
Yeah.
And then honestly after that, I didn't have like a really big win for quite a while. For maybe, I mean, I got second at the Abu Dhabi Grand Slam at brown belt. I got double gold at like one of the opens, like the Long Beach Open. I had some decent performances, but I didn't have like a big win. I got third at the Euros, and then after that, I won the ADCC trials. So then that's like the next like big defining moment, and that was at a time where like I hadn't won anything big in, you know, 8 months, and I like really needed to win, and then boom, I like pulled off the biggest win so far of my like competition career. Um, and then same thing kind of happened again, where
Yeah.
I lost at the Pans. I didn't have a good performance at the Pans. I didn't podium, and then I got hurt and I was out for like 4 months, and then I went into ADCC camp, and I had a good performance at ADCC, but it's not a win. It doesn't matter. I didn't podium. Uh, and then went into the next Nogi Worlds injured and didn't do well, got third. And then took more time off for the injury. And then boom, submission underground. Big win. Beat like Cody Steele, beat Roberto. So then that would be like the next kind of like defining moment. So now I'm like, I feel I'm healthy. My conditioning is really, really good right now. My jiu-jitsu feels really sharp. And so now the goal for me is to stay healthy and string some wins together, because I've had I've had some good wins and I have some good titles on my resume, but I've struggled the past couple of years with being consistent. So that's my goal now, is being consistent and staying healthy, and hopefully I can string some wins together and not just do like a big win and then like bad performance, bad performance, bad performance, big win. Like, it's cool to get those big wins, but I want to be a little more consistent with my performances.
Totally understandable, and I think it's really the goal is to be consistent, and I think you'll get there, and I think it's going to happen soon for you. What advice might you give somebody who's also looking to make those defining moments happen for them?
I would say, I mean, the biggest thing with jiu-jitsu is that you have to compete a lot. You have to compete as much as possible, because at first, um, you're so nervous when you're competing that you don't perform at your best. And the more like experience that you get, the more comfortable that you are competing, and the more that you can compete up to your potential. So I would say, compete as much as possible. The other thing is that you have to be training at a gym that also has other competitors and has, some high level coaching as well. I see a lot of people that are training at gyms with maybe instructors that have never competed, or man, I know a lot of instructors that don't even know the rules, or you hear them coaching and they're telling their students the wrong thing. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be with a professor that knows the rules and has some experience in competition, and you have to have some high level training partners. Like, if you want to be a world champ, surround yourself with other world champions.
I think it's really good advice. So you mentioned your goals. What about what happens after Craig Jones? What have you got in mind?
Um, I'm in talks with Fight to Win to do like a Fight to Win, maybe 2 or 3 weeks after,
Nice.
and then after that, honestly, I want to start. I want to start getting back to the wrestling, and
Uh-huh.
start preparing for the trials. I want to make sure that I'm sharp for the trials, and I don't know. I'm thinking about doing both of them. I mean, last time I won the West Coast trials, but the West Coast is after the East Coast, so it kind of puts me in a weird spot because um, I would have to obviously travel because I'm
Right.
like I can drive to the West Coast trials, so I would have to travel to the East Coast trials. But then like you never know, you might not win the West Coast trials, and then if you don't win, you're going to be thinking like, damn, I should have done the East Coast trials too. Uh, so I might do both of them just to make sure that I secure the spot.
Yeah.
Um, and then I don't know. I might. I think I have like a small chance to maybe get an invite just because I had a decent performance last time. But I don't want to like bank on that.
I think it's really smart. And for you, you mentioned maybe doing both. Do you think you might see a different style at each of them, or do you feel like it's mostly expect the same thing at both?
I think you can expect the same thing at both. I think what we're going to see a lot at the trials is a lot more wrestlers that are converting because of what we saw with Nikki Rod. You know, Nikki Rod was like a
100%.
D3 wrestler, um,
Come out there and murk
and
a bunch of people.
yeah, and within like I think he trained for like 6 months, and then at the East Coast trials he got like second or third, and then at the West Coast trials he won, and then less than a year later he's like beating some of the best guys in the sport and gets second place at ADCC. It's insane. So,
It's
so if
crazy.
I'm, yeah, if I'm like a, let's say I'm like a D1 national champ, and I see Nikki Rod who's like D3 and training for 6 months. In my mind, I'm thinking like, oh my god, this guy's like making all this money off of uh, super fights, sponsorships. He's
Yep.
like built his brand and like built his name so much off of doing like the trials and doing ADCC. Um, why wouldn't I do that too? So I think what you're going to see is a lot of wrestlers come in, and we might see one or two of them win, but I think a lot of them are going to be surprised. Like guys are just going to sit the guard and heel hook them.
100%. That I think maybe jiu-jitsu people might try to focus a little bit more on wrestling, but like you said, mostly they probably just want to set the guard and try to work their way around that.
Yeah, I don't know because the thing is like I'm like people say I have like some of the better wrestling out of jiu-jitsu guys, and my wrestling really isn't that good compared to like a national champ. If I wrestled a national champ, like it wouldn't look good. I'm pretty sure I can wrestle with maybe a guy that's D1, but I don't know if I can hang with like a national champ. I might be able to hang with him, but so I think it would be kind of useless for like a guy that's never wrestled before, a jiu-jitsu guy that plays like leg locks, to like start working on his wrestling. Like just double down on leg locks and leg lock the wrestler, bro. You know?
True. Mason, I think that's all I had for you. I really appreciate you coming on here. Is there anyone you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to my sponsor, Moya Brand. Give a shout out to CTA under Kyle Terra, and shout out to Submission Underground for having me on. And thanks for figuring out a way to still hold competitions during the Corona times, and giving us a platform to go out there and showcase our skills and to make some money. So thanks, Joe and Heather.
100%. I'm gonna give a shout out to our sponsors, B2G Coffee Co., Stitch Nine, and anyone who's watching. If you like these shirts, the Grappling Hearts, our sponsor Sweets Apparel was super cool. They got them up on our website. Check them out. Again, Mason, thanks for coming on here. I appreciate you giving your time to us. I think you'll do really well. Good luck in your next competition. Kill it.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.